Professor Mario Draghi today. It's a great honor for me and for our agency. I think I don't need to make any introduction here today, but we all know that Mr. Draghi is one of the most influential political and economic figures in Europe and beyond. It is exactly 1 month now, I guess. Mr. Draghi launched a report which is exactly called The Future of European Competitiveness. It was a direct request from European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. And since 1 month, at least in Europe, everybody talks about the report. I am a vivid reader of Financial Times. In every single page, at least 3 or 4 times, Mario Draghi names is mentioned. And this is, I think it must be a very great feeling, I guess, Professor Draghi, and such a big interest and influence of this report. I ask myself why this report, there are many reports made, this report attracts so much attention. Policymakers, governments, business, finance, everywhere. I think there are 3 reasons. One, the Europe, everybody, I think, who is a bit objective knows that Europe is facing major challenges. And Professor Draghi's report made very good diagnosis of where the problems are. You know, when you go to the health checkup, all the analysis, the laboratory analysis are made, and there is no much discussion about whether or not this analysis is right or wrong. It's accepted by everybody, so right analysis. Second, how the treatment should be made, concrete, pragmatic, and granular suggestions, recommendations, very clear. I think this is the second reason why it attracts so much attention. And the third reason why it attracts so much attention was it was made by Professor Draghi himself and his credibility. So as a result, we are, as the International Energy Agency, we are so honored to have Professor Draghi with us. And I had the privilege to, throughout this 1 year, several discussions with Professor Draghi on this subject. And in fact, as IEA, we made several input contributions to the study. Now, today, we are here to discuss some of the key elements of this report, which is very influential, as I said, and especially in the context of the energy sector. We have today around the table several ambassadors from Europe, but also beyond, the business leaders, and some representatives of media, and we are broadcasting this event. And I would like now turn to Professor Draghi, if you want to say a few words before we start the session, sir.
Oh, sure. I mean, I'll never forget when I was here about a year ago and got no clue on how to do this report. And that first meeting here and the conversation we had together gave me a lot of encouragement. And as you reminded a moment ago, that about the contribution that the IEA has done to the report, and I want to acknowledge this clearly here. So I'm deeply grateful for that very beginning and for the continuation of our work together. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Draghi. This is a great honor for the International Energy Agency we are very happy to support the EU, our member countries, and beyond. Now, dear colleagues, in order to facilitate this discussion, I requested our good friend, French ambassador and former minister, Ahmed de Montchalin, who is we are in France, the host country, to run this process. Can I turn over to you, Madam Ambassador, to run this session?
Merci beaucoup et bienvenue. These will be the only French words I will be talking today, so don't worry, you don't need translation. We are very honored, I think, to have around the table indeed ambassadors, both bilateral ambassadors in France, but also ambassadors at the OECD, as well as business, financial sector, a number of journalists also with us today. And I've been tasked and asked by Fatih to moderate and what will be a discussion and a dialogue between Mario Draghi and merci beaucoup, again, to be with us, and Fatih Birol, followed by a short session of question and answers. I say short because I think our distinguished guest has a plane to catch, so I'm under huge time pressure. But we will start with the first question, maybe to you, Mr. Draghi. We have in Europe Fit for 55, so we have very ambitious climate and CO2 and emission gases targets. We also have a very important trade-off that some people call the trade-off between the end of the world and the end of the month, i.e. between climate and jobs. So the question is how these climate targets are compatible or could be made compatible with jobs, with prosperity, and with competitiveness.
Well, my first reaction to this question, and in general, to the debates that are actually taking place nowadays in Europe on a greater and greater intensity, is that first, I think we must remain ambitious on our climate targets. And we must remain ambitious first and foremost because we've decided to start this fight against climate change years ago. And what's happened since then, since we've taken that decision, shows only that the costs of climate change are going to be very, very much bigger than, I don't think very, very much bigger says in English, but much, much bigger than the cost that we have actually to bear in order to fight climate change. So I think that's the very first statement. Second part of the statement is, however, we must remain ambitious, but we must learn from experience. We must remain ambitious also looking at our narrower Europe. And we see that if our firms, if we all of us pay energy several times more than what our competitors do in US and China especially, and by the way, now we pay it between 3 and 5 times. Before the energy crisis was 2 and 3 times. So if anything, the drama has been worsening there. There's no way we can be competitive. So one purpose of decarbonization is actually to make us competitive, is actually to increase growth in Europe, to support growth in Europe. So much so the report says that decarbonization is a source of growth, a source of competitiveness in Europe. Also, if we look at our strengths, we're not strong in natural resources. We're not a great producer of natural gas or oil. While we look at our strengths in the renewable sector, and we can safely say that we are pretty on a good track there. We are on a good track all across all clean tech spectrum. And we're also quite endowed with renewable energy sources, both sun and wind. But also nuclear and other technologies, we are pretty advanced. So we got to build on our strengths to fight our weakness. Now, in order to do so, however, we got to be consistent. And to be consistent, we have to accelerate decarbonization, because one thing we've not done very well so far is to actually bring the benefits of the lower prices coming from renewables to the end users, both industries and consumers. We haven't done that much. And that is the problem that is now very often confused with the fight to climate change. I think that is the problem. Energy keeps on being very expensive. And that is what puts at risk jobs and growth, not the fact that we are fighting climate change. So what to do there, it's quite clear. We'll probably discuss this later on, but there is no silver bullet. One thing is we got to be consistent, namely having policies that are aligned with our objectives. If we have ambitious objectives, we have to have ambitious policies. And these policies range across supporting an accelerated pace of decarbonization, but also making whoever operates in that spectrum, and also the ones who will be most affected by the energy transformation, in a condition to be competitive. Just let me finish this point with two observations. First, on the points of strength. The IEA has a quite interesting estimate showing that in the south of Europe today, to build a power generation out of renewables costs us about a half of what it would cost to build a power generation out of natural gas. Now, that is a very interesting fact by itself. Now, we should make too much of this, of course, because when you look at other bottlenecks coming from renewable sources like soil, like the surface that you've got to be used, like grids and so on, we see that it's not easy. But this would tell us that the next step is not to give up on our chances to be competitive, but rather to overcome the bottlenecks that nowadays hamper the transmission of the benefits of renewables to all consumers. Second point about data. That's another interesting estimate. Lots of people are saying that that what we do on climate cannot actually be considered a source of growth. And the reason is, and that's very, very much economist thinking, the reason is that if an input becomes more expensive, it's quite natural that production will become more expensive. But the answer to this is, you find the answer to this in an estimate of the European Central Bank, where they go and they ask, if we are to, I reversed it as we were saying, if we are to lower the energy prices to the level of the United States have today, we would increase our growth, but not only growth, we increase our potential growth by 1% a year. So potential is forever, which means that, and that's about, it's about 1/3, 1/2 of the yearly cost for climate policies, for climate change. But that's forever. So the answer is that investments in climate today raise potential output and do repay themselves across time. Stop here now.
Yeah, the time question is also the debt question. Is how we make the intertemporal choices of doing today what costs today but will benefit tomorrow. Fatih, from also you wrote a very interesting and maybe promising op-ed in the FT in December 2022 calling for a new European industrial master plan. When we hear the points of Mario Draghi, given your focus on energy, what would you add to start a discussion on this trade-off, climate and jobs, climate and competitiveness?
Thanks, Amelia. Now, I would say the following. I am not here to give any history lectures, but I believe in the last several decades, as far as Europe is concerned, we made 3 strategic historical mistakes. One of them was to over-reliance of our energy on one single country and model our economy in big time to Russian energy. And when it is gone, we are in trouble. The manufacturing industry was based on modeled on the cheap and abundant Russian energy, and it is finished, and it will not come back. And manufacturing industry is the backbone of the European economy and employment. And as Professor Draghi perfectly pointed out, the future is clean energy technologies. So from that angle, what I wrote there 2.5 years ago, Europe needs a new industrial master plan, and we have two jobs. Job number one, our current existing industries in Europe, iron and steel, petrochemical, aluminum, and the others, they have a major cost gap with their competitors around the world. Which of them and how we are going to bridge that cost gap, and they should still be alive and part of the economy without having major negative consequences from downsizing, shutting down, or relocating. So this is the job number one. With the existing ones, what are we going to do with them? And how are we going to make them survive under these difficult economic conditions? The second job is how the European manufacturing industry will be ready for the next chapter of the economy, which is clean energy technology manufacturing. The solar panels, wind turbines, batteries, electric cars, and others. So we have these two jobs, and in order to Europe to be still competitive and has a weight in the global landscape, I think one thing is very clear, and therefore this report is very important, to harmonize economic, industry, energy, climate, and trade policies, and especially trade policies may be requiring another look how they should be formulated in order to, especially for the new technologies, at least in some of them, to have a good position for European companies.
Fatih, you said we've done 3 mistakes. You stopped at the first one. I think it's good for the diagnosis. We also look at the 2 other ones.
Okay, I will say just to give them, because it will take a lot of time. One of them is the over-reliance on Russia. The second one is, in the 1990s, 30% of European electricity came from nuclear power. But many European countries turned their back to nuclear power, and now, in 3-4 years, it is coming down to 15%, half of it. And this is a big challenge. And not only for the European electricity or energy system, it is also when Europe wants, or European countries want to export their technologies, nuclear technologies, they have a disadvantage because the buyers say, if you don't do it at home, why do you want to sell it to me? So this is the second mistake. The third mistake, in my view, this morning we released our major report on renewables, and it says that 60% of all new power plants in the world are solar. And China is dominating the game today. But 20 years ago, it was Europe who started the solar adventure, marathon. And the first solar panels were produced in Europe, and we dropped the ball, and the Chinese took it over. Lack of a consistent, coherent strategy, industrial strategy, innovation strategy here. So in my view, these are the 3 historical mistakes: over-reliance on Russia, dropping the nuclear, and also not to follow up the solar and clean energy technology throughout the years and leaving to other countries.
So after now we are clear on our mistakes, let's look at the future. Mario Draghi, in your report, and you just started to do so, you insist a lot on the price level and on the price volatility. I think we would be very all interested in understanding how you think we can manage this price system while we have 27 different states, 27 different regulation, energy mixes which are also different, and a huge, as you said, difference in prices. IEA gave me this morning the data. Today, we were paying 150% more retail energy prices, and we are paying the gas 345% more than the US. So on the price piece.
Thank you, Amelie. I'll discuss the price, though I'd be tempted to follow up on Fatih on actually asking him why we ended up over-relying on Russia and why we abandoned nuclear, but especially why we made that mistake on solar panels 25 years ago. But I will go, I mean, I'll obey your orders, Amelie. So I will go on prices now. Now, there isn't one silver bullet or just one good answer to this. We lack of natural resources. That's one very simple answer. But all the other reasons are not nature-made, are man-made or woman-made. To the lack of natural resources, there is only one way to answer. That is to say, accelerate decarbonization. And that's what we've discussed before. There's also another thing to say there, that we buy natural gas from the rest of the world, either pipeline gas or liquid gas, and we don't actually do much, probably anything. We are the largest importer of gas in the world. So if we were to act together, we could actually have some market power. And we don't seem to be able to do it. But certainly, rationally speaking, that is also one part of the answer to the high prices of gas and high volatility, is to have joint procurement. But let me now come to the man or woman-made reasons. The way we price gas, it's basically, these reasons have to do with the market structure of energy in Europe. We price energy at the marginal cost of the most expensive source. So very often that's gas. So we price all energy at that way. Now that, whatever the price is, that already by itself is not a very smart thing to do, because we are pricing all energy according to the most volatile part of the energy mix. First thing. Second, we price all our energy based on something that it's not under our control at all. Because as we've seen, unfortunately, painfully, during the war of Russian invasion in Ukraine, where natural gas had been used as a weapon. That's why it's not very smart to do that. So one first answer the report gives is to try to decouple the price of energy from the price of natural gas. And the ways the report suggests is that we should use different contractual arrangements so that we would have sort of a long-term pricing agreements through various types of contracts for different contracts, PPA, and other forms of contracts that basically detach the price that the industry pays or the users pay for natural gas from the spot price of gas. Mind, it's not that we don't do it. There are a few countries, very few countries, who actually do it in Europe and do it well. And the price of energy in these countries is way lower than the price paid by Italy, Germany, and others. By the way, one such country is Sweden, where the use of these contracts is pretty spread. So that's one thing we could do there. There are other interesting things that one could do, trying to sort of decrease the influence of spot price volatility on the rest of the energy mix. But we should also mind one thing, just to give you an idea. Now, in the energy mix, renewable resources have increased their share very significantly, which is another thing that makes us confident, not optimistic, but confident. Certainly, we can make it. It's now about, what, 47% on average in Europe? It used to be something like 10%, but not long ago. And for example, in 2022, the renewables were representing something like 60% of the energy mix. But in fact, the price was set by natural gas. Oh, by the way, natural gas was representing 23% of the energy mix during that year. But it actually made the price for the whole of energy 67% of the times. Now, this tells another thing, that in spite of the fact that we are accelerating decarbonization and the share of renewables in the energy mix is going up, natural gas will stay as a source, as the basic sort of pricing benchmark for the mix. And that's why we should absolutely decouple the price of energy from the spot price of natural gas. Now, this brings me directly to the other side of the question. Oh, I'm sorry, let me finish with markets. The next thing that keeps the price high is taxation. Energy has become the cash cow for national budgets in many of our countries, and natural gas separately, but also energy altogether. And that's something we want to give a look at, that whether it's actually the smartest way to tax an industry or an economy, given that that is an essential ingredient of growth. And finally, there is another feature of the energy market that now, being the spot price volatile, this does require that the actors in this market do hedge against the short, long positions they take in the in the energy market. And so part of the final price contains the financial costs of this hedging, and the whole, I would say, finance of energy is actually run by 3 or 4 players that are entirely unsupervised. So we have a big concentration and no supervision. And you give me the answer of what this produces. So these are all market features. Then I basically touched on all of that. We should improve our coordination. I think these are by and large what we could do on the energy market today. The report talks about creating an energy union. Clearly, at the essence of all this is the ability to build grids for production, grids for distribution. And then ideally in the future, when the largest part of the energy mix will be renewables, natural gas would only be used to balance the possible shortfalls of energy here and there. And in this sense, again, the introduction of AI in the management of the grids is going to be another crucial component of a well-functioning energy market in Europe. Thank you.
Fatih, do you want to react on this market structure, taxes, grids, hedging?
I would say maybe it was, it's an excellent overview. If I may, I would make, when we talk about Europe, there are always, not always, most of the time, bad news. May I give a good news now? So I want to give a good news based on one of our reports. And one, I believe, how the European energy strategy should be based on just one idea there. The good news is the following for Europe. Professor Draghi mentioned, you also mentioned, Amelie, and today we have a major problem of cost of energy for our manufacturing industry, for the legacy, for the existing industries. Now, next week, we are publishing our flagship publication, World Energy Outlook, managed by my colleague Lara Cozy and Tim Bult. Both of them are here, and they're a big team. And one message is very interesting for Europe, very good news for Europe, for a change, which is the following. We are going to see, starting from 2025 onwards, in the natural gas markets, as a result of huge amount of new LNG supply coming from US and Qatar, we are going to see the markets are going to change, swap from the markets of sellers to buyers, and we will see much more reasonable natural gas prices. Second, in terms of oil markets, this is our second source of bill, energy import bill of Europe. We leave aside the geopolitical tensions now. We don't know what will happen, if anything happens. But when you look at the market fundamentals, demand is weakening, especially from China, because of Chinese economy and electric cars. Lots of supply coming from different countries, especially from US and others. So in the oil markets, we will see reasonable prices, leaving aside the geopolitical tensions. Even some of you may see in Middle East, so many things are happening, and the oil prices are still $70 in that range. Normally, in a normal world, this would have gone skyrocketing. So this relatively lower energy price environment and the entering in the next few years might be, for Europe, a breathing space. Just breathe a bit and make the most out of this 3-4 years to prepare for the next chapter. This is one good news I want to give. Second, however, my suggestion is the following. For Europe, in the strategic terms, Europe will need energy all the time. Energy is the source of life, source of economy. But I think we should move from a fossil fuel, oil, gas, coal-dominated economy to an electricity-dominated economy. Electricity is the future. So we should go from the molecules to electrons. Renewables. We have renewables in Europe. Wind in the north, as Professor Draghi mentioned, a lot of solar in the south, and building grids, storage, and bringing it together would be a very important, in my view, priority. And the second one is, as you might have seen from the guess from what I said in the beginning, the mistakes, I think a nuclear power, in my view, should play an important role in Europe, both in terms of the technologies which are already with us, the traditional technologies, but also with the small modular reactors. So I see, for the future of Europe, I see the electricity is the driving of the European economy and the society rather than the fossil fuels, and we should prepare ourselves for that. And using next 3-4 years, low import bills for oil and gas as a good breathing space and get prepared for it.
Professor Draghi, do you want to answer? I have questions still in my bag, so I can put questions on the floor or let you comment if you want on these points.
I think I would agree entirely with that. One danger of low gas prices, of course, is we go back to using more gas and less, and we do less on decarbonization. But I don't think so, because the climate change is moving forward, whatever the gas prices are. We see the damages every day. So I don't think that the tension will decrease. It may give some breathing space, especially to energy-intensive industries, but I don't think that, frankly, I don't expect a backtracking on decarb because of gas prices.
Well, temperature in 2023 was 1.4 3, so one very close to 1.5. So indeed, it would be good not to backtrack. Now, moving to a different theme is the question of dependencies. How we became, as Fatih was saying, how we became dependent and ultra dependent on a number of countries, and one in particular being China, both in terms of critical minerals refinery and use, and also in terms of clean tech, where we support a lot the demand of our customers and companies, but the supply doesn't come from us. So my question to you, Professor Draghi, is how is it realistic to think we can be less dependent in terms of critical raw minerals? And the same question on clean technologies. We have been, for good reasons, supporting demand. Should we also now support supply? Because we've seen that by supporting demand, we supported imports and we reinforced our dependencies.
Well, let me give you a sort of a medium long-term answer and then a more shorter-term answer to your questions. Clearly, Europe cannot think about defending itself. The report says explicitly, we are not the United States. We are a much more open economy, the most open economy in the world. Our 50% of our GDP comes from trade versus 27%, if I'm not mistaken, in the US. So the idea, the strategy of building a wall around, a tariff wall around the European economy is not feasible. So the long-term answer to your question about dependencies, which are, by the way, are indeed there, just a number, between 35 and 70% of the processing capacity is in the hands of the most critical, the critical raw materials is in the hands of China. So from cobalt to copper to aluminum to nickel to lithium and so on. So these are dependencies that affect all kinds of industries, by the way, but especially the clean tech, because that's where all our energies are. But the answer to this is in the medium to long term it's not really defensive. It's not predominantly the defensive one, but it's clearly innovation. We should find out technologies that do without the minerals that we don't have. And that's very possible. It's been done. So it's been done today, these days. There is a flurry of interesting ideas that you see this if you follow the specialized literature every day pop out with these things, with changes in materials used. The second answer is circularity. We are learning to reuse the stuff. And one estimate says that circularity could actually, I suspect this is not only European, but it's global. Circularity could actually meet about 50% of total world demand for these materials. So these are the long-term answers. In the short term, this goes back to what Fatih was saying before about having subsidized the demand for solar panels. We ended up subsidizing Chinese producers. Now, if you look at that again from a pure economist perspective, you sort of question the need to subsidize supply, to subsidize production, because the demand subsidy is the same. However, there are several reasons why you want to subsidize production, not necessarily of solar panels, because that's gone now, and I don't think it can be retraced, at least with the current technologies. Now, a way the report phrases, actually, I like that. We let the Chinese taxpayer paying for their subsidies, so we benefit from that on the solar industry. But in other industries, we have to realize one thing, and I'll go back. Ultimately, all energy will come, we want all energy coming from renewable, almost all energy coming from renewables. So there we have a security issue. We want to make sure that we are not ever, never again in the situation we were with Russia at the beginning of the war. So, and we have learned to our cost how mobile, how variable are the geopolitical conditions in the world. So that suggests that we actually do strain to make our own production of clean tech. That's one reason. But there's a second reason. Many of these industries, of these technologies, are in an infant stage yet. One estimate, again, is that about a third of the reduction in CO2 emissions between now and 2050, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be corrected, is depending on technologies that are at an initial stage.
Exactly.
It's correct. So it's yours.
I know by heart.
Yeah.
So
Good. So it's here we have what the economists called an infant industry argument. We want to protect this industry. We want to grow, make it grow. But let me finish. I mean, this would not be enough. We have also to change ourselves, to change the conditions in Europe whereby small companies cannot scale up their production, or at least find it very, very difficult, so much so that they leave. And they often go to the United States. Thank you.
Fatih, same question on these dependencies. As you know all by heart. How do you take the recommendations made in this report as complement to what you have been talking and saying to our leaders?
yeah. So I fully agree with them, of course. But one thing I should make us, all of us, we are trying to do it since some time. We did it in our last year in Energy Technology Perspectives book. We look at the entire clean technology manufacturing, and what we see is that where the critical minerals are, where the technologies, manufacturing, where it is concentrated, the issue is the following: the greener we go, the more we end up in red, which means China. Currently, it is the situation. Solar, not only manufacturing, but also we talk about critical minerals, but it's not only mining. We talk about always on mining. More importantly, China is today, they were clever enough, 80% of the refining and processing of critical minerals are in China. So think about the following. For example, with crude oil, you cannot do much. You have to refine it to make it gasoline and diesel and LPG, jet fuel. And this refining system for the critical minerals, 80% of the world is in China. Not only the mining, the critical minerals itself, but its processing. So this is a very important issue, and it's in my view, it is today's key energy security issue. And it is the reason we have, as you know, Amelie, we brought 50 countries around the world here to organize the first critical security summit of the world. And we are now working on, inspired by our oil stock security mechanism, a critical minerals security mechanism, how the countries can work with each other and harmonize their policies and strategies. I think current energy security issues, such as oil and gas, is very important, but we must also think of tomorrow's energy security issues, such as the critical minerals and also technology manufacturing, which is also concentrated in this way. We have never seen in any other commodity so much concentration in one single country. And it is not because this country will do this or that, but for example, for the solar panels, a very critical part of the solar panels is manufactured in one province in China. If something happens in that province, in earthquake, fire, and so on, the entire global supply chain of solar will be paralyzed. So diversification is the magic word here, and I think from a policy perspective, we have to take this also into account.
So I think we will be able now to see if our participants have questions. I would like to balance the questions from governments and questions from industry and business. I understand, so Italy and Japan will be our two countries to start. And I see EDF and potentially Air Liquide. We discussed before, but that will be. So I will start with Italy, then EDF, then Japan, then Air Liquide. Italy, Luca.
Merci, Amélie. President Draghi, I would like to recall to begin with the outstanding impulse you gave as Italian Prime Minister to strengthen Italy's energy security through the differentiation of supply sources after the Russian aggression against Ukraine. As Chief of Staff of the Italian Foreign Minister of your government, I perfectly recall your action to relaunch cooperation with partner countries, in particular on the African continent. As I indicated, this is a common concern, in fact, not only for European countries. And I also note with great pleasure that an important part of your report is focused on increasing energy security and differentiate the supply chain on the assumption that Europe will continue to remain free only if we are more independent. And this is a common concern not only for European countries. Also in the context of the current Italian G7 presidency, we have worked to promote partnership and global engagement to secure mineral supply for the twin digital and green transition. So now, in this regard, I would like to ask you your opinion on how the European Union could reinforce partnership with African countries in the field of critical raw materials and energy security through an equal and mutually beneficial relationship, as one the present Italian government is aiming at achieving through the Mattei Plan for Africa. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. EDF, the shorter you are in your questions, the longer you have the answers.
Yes, I understand perfectly. Thank you, Amélie. And thank you very much, Professor Draghi and Mr. Birol, for the opportunity of this discussion. I perfectly follow your way of thinking regarding the fact that we need to switch from, I would say, fossil-driven economy in Europe towards electricity and low-carbon electricity-driven economy, and on the fact that we need to look at a balanced portfolio with all technologies. Among those technologies, and my question won't be a surprise, I guess, there is nuclear, as you said. I would be interested in your views about the specific role that could play nuclear regarding European competitiveness.
Merci. Japan, Jun, if you want to ask your question.
Thank you. At the beginning of this meeting, Dr. Birol said that Europe talks so much about the Draghi report, but actually, it is not correct. I think that the world is talking much about the Draghi report. And even in Japan, we talk so much about your report, saying some people say that we should have a Draghi report on Japanese economy. So maybe we should invite you to Tokyo very soon. And I have two questions very shortly. First of all, innovation. In your report, it's written that innovation is a kind of keyword for the European economic development. So my question is that in what kind of which area of the innovation you are expecting, especially as this is IEA, that in energy sector, if you have any particular innovation which you're expecting so much for increasing competitiveness. And my second question is that what the already Amélie and you talked a little bit about the compatibility between increasing the Europe competitiveness and the countermeasures to the climate change. I think sometimes it could not be incompatible. For example, in order to increase and keep your competitiveness, for example, if you take a tariff on the import on battery and EV from China, that will in short term and mid-term increase the cost of the energy climate countermeasures. So how do you deal with that? And as Japan is not Europe, and the IEA is a global organization, I really hope and wish that those kind of implementing of the Draghi report will not lead to the, the protectionism entre guillemets, and with increasing your competitivity of the EU members, international cooperation between EU and the like-minded countries, including Japan and all the members of the IEA, is vitally important in this regard. Thank you.
Turning to Air Liquide, Benoît Potier, and then we will take generally to finish.
Okay.
No?
Air
Yes.
Liquide.
Air Liquide, generally, and then the answers.
Okay.
Sorry.
The risk is that I forget the questions.
We will help you.
Go ahead.
So I need to be very short then. Okay, thank you. So we share the observation that the energy intensive industries are really essential for the competitiveness of Europe, and we need to succeed in their decarbonization. And as such, of course, hydrogen and carbon capture that, by the way, come together. They are not isolated for many industries. Were rightly identified in the report because they are essential, an essential part of the energy transition. These are, and you highlighted that, these are technologies that have been mastered by Europeans. And when I look at the report, we still have the ability to make a success of these technologies. It's not yet done, but we have added a lot of complexities in regulations, in particular, the horizontal and vertical regulations. I will just quote one example. We set the goals, but we also impose the milestones. We are not technology agnostic. And this is really, for most of us, a problem. If we add on all those regulations that we have to deal with, there's a lot of investments that are frozen today and will only unlock if we have a visibility on the simplification. My question then is, what decisions can the European Commission, the Parliament, and the Member States take quickly to make a real industrial and climate policy actionable and not just a wish? And without, of course, adding more complexity to the framework that we are operating in. Thank you.
And we finished the tour de table with finance, which is the key question from Italy.
Thank you so much. So from Generali, so thank you so much for this report, because it's an opportunity to put many different point of views and information together.
I'm sorry, can you speak up because I don't get you?
Can you hear? It doesn't work. It works. Okay, super. So thank you so much for the report. I think it's an opportunity to put together a lot of information, and we really needed to have like everything in one document. Let me say that as Generali, we do support the transition of the economy towards a net zero. But we see also the risk of climate change already happening and hitting SMEs, households, and big companies and infrastructures. So the question for me is really about adaptation. So what is the role of adaptation strategy in securing competitiveness? And what is the role of SMEs? Because the SMEs are the backbone of the European economy and very often are outside all the really big discussion on how to transform the economy, but how to make the economy more resilient. And last but not least, please do go global. There is a COP21, there will be a COP30. I think this kind of recommendation should really kind of not only be limited to Europe, which is already a huge work, but I think that as an institutional investor we really need to have to make sure that this kind of recommendation are shared internationally beyond Europe.
Merci. Floor back to you, Mario Draghi, and then Fatih Birol.
Thank you. The first question is from Italy, and the report says often that in order to be, the report says often pleads for consistency in policies with, as I've done a moment ago, with the objectives that are set. Part of the policies that need to be consistent have to do with trade policies. Part of them have to do, especially in the field, in the real more critical raw materials, for example, with doing to some extent what our competitors do. Our competitors, like South Korea and Japan, have CRM platforms. So they actually do joint procurement for CRM. That way, they have market power in facing the suppliers. But that's only a beginning. Our competitors signed cooperation treaties with these countries where, in exchange of CRMs, they do foreign direct investment. Now here, I want to add one thing. It's one thing that we Europeans would like to do is not simply to do foreign direct investments, because we'd fall again in a sort of difficult thing where we go there, we would exploit this country in a way or another. This country is much weaker than us, or much poorer than we are. So the important thing is that we give objectives to these foreign direct investments that are shared with the local governments, like, for example, decarbonization. So helping them to decarbonize their economies. So I think that's a space where I don't think we've done anything yet as Europe. So maybe anything is too strong a word. I don't know exactly what, but I'm not sure we've done this. All these things linked together: foreign direct investment, joint procurement, exchanges, climate-friendly foreign direct investments. The second and the fourth question have to do with nuclear energy and with hydrogen and carbon capture technologies. Yes, there is a bias. There has been a bias towards these source of energy, so the source of technologies. The report takes and stated several times, takes a carbon neutral technology approach. And I think that the time where we can be kind of nitty-picky about what we want to do is over. I think we should choose, we should go fast. We should choose the best technology given its costs, its environmental implications, its situation, and so on. One thing that strikes me is that we are going to have to suffer probably from the bottleneck related to the lack of grids, either for distribution or production, for some time. These are not investments that can be made in a brief span of time. And so it makes more sense, technologies that can be brought directly to the user would clearly have an advantage over other technologies where the renewable and sourced energy would have to go through grids. So both SMRs, more nuclear reactors, carbon capture, and hydrogen near the energy intensive industries is one solution that strikes me as being pretty rational. I have two questions from Japan. Innovation is really the backbone of the report. The report looks through that first. We really go through the whole innovation cycle, from education to placing universities at the frontier of excellence. So there are actions and suggestions to that extent, to changing the incentives for inventors to become investors. You know, in the United States, there was a law in 1984, which carries the name of a famous senator at that time, Dole, also candidate to become Republican president, which basically changed the incentives for inventors and empowering much more than they used to be before. And actually, it had a big outcome after that. So it was a flurry of inventions. We got to do that. We have to also allow universities to access, universities in Europe are almost all public, and many of them are prevented from accessing private financing. So there are suggestions to that extent. And then, of course, the main thing is to be able for these inventors to scale up in Europe. So we have to make progress on the single market, basically. There are also suggestions about how to finance investments and innovations, although the underlying conviction of the report is that lack of money is not the primary problem. When there are good ideas, money tend to flock there, as we see from American investors coming to Europe, buy excellent things and bringing them back to the US. So what the US investor does give to the European inventor, which European investors cannot give it to him or to her, is market access to the US market. And so the possibility for the inventor to scale up its company there. On your other question, I want to reassure you, as I've done many times in the last 10 days, the report is not protectionist. Doesn't call for protection, for blanket protectionism. Doesn't want to pick European champions or winners or things like that. The report is very, very cautious on claiming protection, claiming a case for protection, whenever you have a non-level playing field to begin with. And even in that case, we got to be very careful going sector by sector, because being so open, as I was saying before, we're also very vulnerable both to inaction, not doing anything, we see what happens, but also to action, because bigger powers can actually retaliate much more easily against us because we are so open. Look at what's happening today with the Chinese retaliation to the proposed tariffs on cars of about a month ago. So I want to reassure you, if it's possible, that the report does not suggest that Europe turns itself into a protectionist continent. We've derived much of our prosperity from being open all throughout. We want to stay open.
Okay, thank you. Just 4 lines, because we are already late. When I look at from energy markets point of view, the industry, manufacturing, I believe Europe is entering a next 3-4 years a make or break period. And here many important decisions need to be taken, and the report is an excellent framework for that. But from where I stand as head of the IEA, I see for Europe very need of a unified strategy which harmonizes energy, industry, and trade policies. They have to be working together in the same direction. This is number 1. Number 2, I think some of the challenges we discussed today, Europe is facing, can be better addressed if Europe works with its partners and allies, such as Japan, such as the United States, Canada, Australia. Joint work and bring the forces together would be very important, including the next chapter of the energy technologies. Number 3, we always talk about Europe's problems, challenges, recommendations. Europe can do a lot of good things, and we did a lot of good things in Europe. I want to give you 2 examples, recent. Let's talk about the achievements. Number 1, COVID-19. In such a short period of time, having a clear policy, clear strategy, and vaccinating the big chunk of the population. Another success story is the energy crisis. We were caught by surprise, many of the governments, with Russia cutting the energy, and many people thought Europe will freeze, Europe economy will collapse. But the European countries came together, working with the allies, including the United States and the others. Europe went through this energy crisis without freezing, without economic collapsing. Of course, we have some bruises, economic bruises here and there, but we were able to do that. Finally, dear colleagues, I wanted to say that again, we criticize or we look at the problems, challenges now, but we shouldn't forget Europe, like all IEA member countries with its democratic values, human values, social values, is still a source of inspiration to hundreds of millions of people around the world. We shouldn't forget that what Europe has and the other IEA member countries has. With this, I wanted to thank you also, Amelie. So, dear colleagues, we are a bit 15 minutes longer than I promised Professor Draghi. Professor Draghi mentioned our first meeting. There is one thing on that meeting, I'm sure if he will remember or not. It was in my office. Of course, we discussed this issue, and I had the idea to ask Professor Draghi whether we could offer him a cafe that he would like here. So when I became the head of this agency, my most important investment was buying a Italian cafe machine, and he liked it very much. So I am very thankful to him for enjoying a cafe with me, accepting the IES input for his great report, and giving us the honor today. Thank you very much, Professor Draghi.